Hey guys and gals, Effie here. Today we're going to take a slight detour and talk about a current event instead of books and games. Rather, we're going to talk about a topic that is current event adjacent. So, last weekend at the Oscars, Will Smith slapped Chris Rock for making a G.I. Jane joke about his wife, Jada Pinkett Smith. I did not watch the Oscars. My exposure to this has been after the fact. Later on that evening, a friend of mine reached out and she says, "You have alopecia, right?" And I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Have you heard about Will Smith?" I said, "No." And so she showed me a video and I was a little flabbergasted. I couldn't really understand what was going on. Chris Rock cracked a joke and Will Smith was laughing. Jada Pinkett Smith was very clearly not laughing, very unamused. The woman had a face like thunder. But her husband was laughing, and then the camera pans away, and then the next thing we see is Will Smith storming up on stage. And all I can imagine is when the camera panned away, he looked at his wife, realized how upset she was, and decided to take action. I think we can all agree that the answer to someone saying something we don't like is not to enact violence against them. Especially when you have a platform like Will Smith's. He can get anyone to talk to him at any time, anywhere. He's surrounded by cameras, he's surrounded by reporters, and oh, by the way, later on that night, they called him up on stage. That was the time to address it, So I'm just going to leave that aside and talk about alopecia and sort of the effect that it has on women and hopefully help people understand why it would be so hurtful. And I know that a lot of folks don't know what alopecia is. It is an autoimmune disorder where your body's immune system attacks your hair follicles, and not necessarily the hair follicles on your head, but most commonly. And it presents itself in a few different ways. There's, depending on what documentation you look at, there's between 5 and 8 different kinds of alopecia. I have the type known as alopecia areata, which means my hair falls out in random chunks, and I wind up with these little bald patches on my head. For the most part, they grow back in. I have a few that didn't. My alopecia started in 2004 when I was in the Middle East, and I didn't know that anything was wrong because it started on the back of my head. And my partner at the time and the woman who worked for us told me, something's wrong, you have some hair missing, and we thought that maybe I'd hit my head or something like that, and then it just didn't stop. And the little teeny tiny bald spots started expanding, and they wound up being about the size of a silver dollar. I had a few of them, and it was certainly an experience. My hair was shorter than it is now, which was unusual in the Middle East anyway. But the part of the Middle East that I was in, it's not expected that non-Muslim women cover their hair. So everybody could see my hair, everybody could see my head, everybody could see my bald patches. And I didn't know what was going on. And I had these little old women come up to me with folk remedies, cut a clove of garlic in half and rub it on your head, or dab it with vinegar, things like that. And it turned out what they were trying to do was treat a fungal infection. So I did everything that they said. I went to the doctors. They didn't know what was going on. And finally I wound up going to a dermatologist specifically. And she's like, "Oh, none of that's going to help you. You have alopecia." I'm like, "Well, what the heck is alopecia?" And she had to explain it to me. So what happens with alopecia is not only does your immune system attack the hair follicles and make the hair fall out, it then puts them to sleep and makes them go dormant so it doesn't grow back in. Sometimes that's permanent, and sometimes it's not. I've been very fortunate. In my case, it's not been permanent in most places. I've seen some folks who have said things like, "Well, you're lucky it's not something worse. It's just hair." And those people don't understand women. So much of the female beauty standard is centered around our hair. How it's cut, how it's styled, what color it is, what texture it is, what ornamentation we put in it. It has cultural significance. It has emotional significance. It's something that we look after and take care of. When I was young, my grandmother used to call our hair our crowning glory. Societies across the world cover it to be more conservative because hair is tied to sensuality. Like clothing and makeup, we use it to express ourselves. We use it to show the world who we are in a very visual, very dynamic sort of way. So the involuntary loss of one of the ways that you express yourself to the world is devastating, especially when it's new. And one of the common ways that people with alopecia, especially when it's new alopecia, when it's just occurred, one of the common ways that we deal with it is we shave our heads. Your body is rebelling against itself, and you don't get a say. Shaving your head gives you some measure of control over the situation. And although it may not be your preferred style, it's at least a style you chose. I think that when compared to some of the more physically devastating autoimmune disorders that a woman could suffer with, like lupus, alopecia seems mild by comparison. But it's only mild because you're not having to deal with it. Is it life-ending? Of course not. But it is life-altering. And it is impactful, particularly when it's just started. I wish that Will and Jada had dealt with the situation differently, but now that it's out there, now that it's in the public eye, I hope that she steps forward and speaks up and makes sure that she uses the opportunity to bring attention to something that affects a lot of people in various ways. I'll link some resources down below in case you want to learn more about alopecia. And if you have any questions for me about my alopecia and my experiences with it, feel free to ask in the comments. I really don't mind answering questions. The more people who understand what alopecia is and how it affects people, the better off all of us are going to be, in particular children who suffer with the disease and get teased and bullied at school. Anyway, that's all I have to say on this topic. Thank you so much for watching. Have an excellent day, and I'll see you next time.